miniature soldiers, big opinions. This is the Conclave Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Conclave Podcast. I'm the Sandman, and joining me today we have the legal department. How are you, Adam?
I'm alright, thanks. How you doing?
I'm good. It's just the two of us this evening as Quipster and BDR are on holiday together. They are currently sharing a hut, denying COVID restrictions. So
Are they in some sort of yurt, glamping or something? I don't.
Yes, I believe so. All I know is Quipster said he only took the one bag. That's all I know. Okay. So today we're talking about something very different to those two, which is that we are talking about the Sisters of Battle. And one of the reasons Sisters of Battle have been on my mind for a long time is because of the 9th edition video, which is, I'm sure everybody has seen by this point. It was all the rage because it was an absolutely fantastic video. It did two kind of really big things in my eyes. The first thing it did is it set the Necrons officially as the big bad guys of 9th edition, which was awesome. Obviously, as we all know, generally speaking, the big bad guy is chaos and its many forms. But we've actually now moved on to the Necrons being the big bad guys. And this is actually something that I believe has come from Age of Sigmar and Age of Sigmar. Each edition, although there hasn't been very many, the big bad guy, as it were. Please imagine my speech marks when I say that. But guys, the big bad guy has changed each edition. And now we've got that, which is really, really cool. As someone that plays a lot of Xenos factions, I can't wait for there to be a Tyranid edition or something like that, where Gene Stealer cults and Tyranids are the focus. It's just so very exciting. And I think everybody is enjoying this kind of change of pace for Warhammer. And I think even Chaos players are, because it kind of makes those Chaos interactions just even more exciting when they come. However, the other thing it really, really did, I believe, is it set Sisters as one of the more prominent factions in 40k. And I think most people would agree with this. So what has happened, as everybody knows, is Games Workshop have made an incredible range of miniatures, and they want you all to buy them. So they are absolutely going to improve their importance. We're not going to ignore the elephant in the room here. And here on the Conclave, we are very, very pro kind of representation in 40k. We think it's a really, really positive thing. And you've got to remember, the more people that invest and get into the hobby, the more money the Games Workshop gets, and the more money they can pay to designers to design the Lion. So it's all good in the long run.
That's the important thing, right?
yeah. So Adam, do you kind of agree with my kind of estimation there? Do you think Sisters are going to be one of the bigger factions this edition?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I must admit, when I saw the 9th edition trailer, when I was watching it on the preview, as I think quite a few of us were, and that bit where you see the guardsmen, you see all the Necron gas weaponry, I was like, or Gorse weaponry, however you want to pronounce it. I was like, that's very cool. That guy's face just got turned into ash. That's pretty awesome.
Brutal. Incredible scene.
Striding out of the dust and the mist, is a Sister of Battle. With power armored up. I was like, okay, this is really cool. We all love. Yeah. I love Space Marines. I have a Space Marine army. You have a Space Marine army. Most of us have a Space Marine army in one form or another. But it was actually really cool to see them bring in a faction, a different part of the Imperium, to be that prominent in the trailer. And that whole first half with the Battle Sister fighting the Scorpec destroyer. Oh yes, amazing.
That nod that. I've actually forgotten. I can't remember if it's actually the captain or just a normal primary. I think it's just a normal.
It's the normal. It's the normal guy, isn't it?
And when he gives that nod to this Adeptus Sororitas, is that the singular Adeptus Sororitas? Do you say that?
I don't know.
To the Adeptus to the Adeptus Sororitas, and that for me, that was what kind of drove that opinion in my head, because it's like the Space Marines approve of this, I approve of this, and. Yeah, I think it would be really good for us to do an episode on kind of Sisters of Battle, because, and I'm really excited to do this with you, Adam, as I've said to you before, because I don't know a massive amount about them. Obviously, they've appeared increasingly in the lore, from Gathering Storm to Dark Imperium, Plague War, bits of lore there. But, can you tell me a bit about the history of Sisters and kind of where they come from?
Yeah, now I'll caveat this at the start with just saying something I'm going to get to here. I actually got wrong in a previous podcast, and I'm going to correct that tonight. I got a name wrong, or I got the role that somebody played slightly wrong, but I'll correct that tonight. So, we'll play some sort of some sort of atmospheric organ music over the top of this while I'm narrating. So you cast your mind back to the dark days of the 36th millennium, and the Imperium is going through something that's known as the Age of Apostasy. And basically, this is just everything. I mean, the Imperium at the best of times can be described as being not in a great state. During the 36th millennium, everything was going a bit mad, and that was because the ecclesiarchy, which is the imperial church, basically, who maintain that the emperor is a god. Which, if you've read the Horus Heresy, you know about the sort of history of this with the Book of Lorgar, and then the I can't remember the Lectitio Divinitatus. Divinitatus. There we go. I love a good bit of cod Latin, which is the sorry trademarkable Latin, which is the kind of the imperial creed. The ecclesiarchy is the church that grows out of that in the aftermath of the heresy, and by the 36th millennium, they're basically in charge. They're running the show. They just have nigh total power. They've got everybody kind of paying tithes to them, and the ecclesiarch, who's basically the space pope, for want of a better term, is considered to be the voice of the emperor. Like, he has total power within the Imperium, and the administratum, which is the kind of the regular, the government of the Imperium, the civil service, they basically are a backseat, and the Adeptus Astartes chapters are all kind of uncoordinated, so it's all going a little bit wrong. At the same time, you end up with, like, the Mechanicus get alienated because they don't like the church, because obviously they have their own religion. They believe in their omnisire, with the emperor as a kind of aspect of the machine god. And there's warp storms, there's demons popping up everywhere because, unsurprisingly, lots of people sort of praying and getting sort of very fervent, and something we'll probably turn to later, generates quite a lot of, like, psychic energy in the warp in the background of the universe. And it basically ends up that the whole Imperium is just going to pot. And sort of out of this kind of world where everybody genuinely seems to believe that, like, the end is nigh, and this is like the Emperor's final judgment upon the Imperium, steps a guy who I mentioned last time, whose name is Goge. I'm never sure how to pronounce it. It's Goge is his first name, Goge or Gogi. I'm going to call him Goge. Goge Van Dyer, and he basically is a politician. He becomes the master of the administratum. Boo. Yes, yeah, very much boo. He becomes master of the administratum and a high lord of terror. And he basically, a little bit like in the real world, a little bit like Stalin did when he sort of took control of the Soviet Union, he made sure that he controlled the sort of the... yeah, also boo. He made sure that he controlled kind of all the people in power. So he had a bunch of people who were his placemen, including the ecclesiarch, a guy called Paulus III. We'll just call him Paul. Eventually, Goge decides that Paul is not his friend anymore, and he wants to be the ecclesiarch. And so he basically launches a coup d'etat, executes the guy, becomes the ecclesiarch because he says he's a heretic, because he has all these cardinals in place that allow him to get elected. So for the first time in imperial history, Goge Van Dyer is both the ecclesiarch and the master of the administratum. So he's in charge of the entirety of the government of the Imperium. What this leads to is a massive civil war on a scale kind of akin to the Horus Heresy, and it's kind of cool this again because, and forgive me for rambling, but we don't talk about it much. We talk about the Horus Heresy loads because it's such a pivotal
Never
event.
apologise for rambling.
But the Reign of Blood is just almost as big a conflict, and that has the potential to shatter the Imperium. And basically, it's a civil war because Van Dyer just starts declaring Astartes chapters are heretics and excommunicatus, and you've got to bear in mind at this time in history, the ecclesiarchy has a huge army called the Frateris Templar, the sort of brothers of the church, and they, alongside his control of effectively of the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum, for people who don't know, it used to be called the Imperial Guard before we went to trademarkable names. He basically used them to just go out and wage war across the Imperium. Now, while during his reign, and I promise I'm getting to sisters, one of the things he does is he hears about this group of warrior women living on a planet called Sanlior, which is just like a farm world, and he basically goes there and he convinces them that he is the voice of the Emperor. And the way he does this is because although they are incredibly fierce warrior women, they live on an agri world, their technology isn't brilliant, and he basically gets shot at, or I think he gets one of his servants to shoot him with like a plasma pistol. He has like a Rosarius, he has like a force field. Nothing happens to him, and the daughters of the Emperor, this group of warrior women basically go, oh wow, he is the voice of the Emperor, and they too believe the Emperor is a god, so they basically become his personal bodyguard, and they're called the Daughters of the Emperor, and they basically end up going to be in the ecclesiastical palace on Terra, and they are his like sort of defenders, executioners. They get given the finest power armor. And basically, this all kind of keeps ticking over. The Reign of Blood happens. This civil war breaks out, and a guy called Sebastian Thor, who is a member of the ecclesiarchy, as far as I'm aware, but like a reformist, he starts something called the Terran Crusade, where he basically gets together a bunch of people who go, look, this Goj Vandaya guy is a dickhead, and we need to get rid of him, otherwise the Imperium is no more. And they end up basically getting the other side in this civil war together, and they end up eventually laying siege to the ecclesiastical palace. Long story short. The Astartes and even some custodians are a little bit surprised when they lay siege to the ecclesiastical palace, because they're expecting the Frateris Templar to be there and it to be a fairly easy thing. It's not, because it turns out that there are loads of these, what will later become the Sisters of Battle in there, the Daughters of the Emperor, and they put up a hell of a fight, and it stops being very easy, and even the Space Marines can't break through them. It ends up being that what happens is a custodian in the end manages to get together the six leaders effectively of the Daughters of the Emperor, so the personal bodyguard of Vandaya, and he brings them before the Emperor, and no one knows quite what's said, but fairly evidently the Emperor, unsurprisingly, convinces these sisters that Vandaya is not the voice of the Emperor. He is a heretic. He's nuts. And they then walk back in there. And this is what I got wrong on the last podcast, by the way. I will own up to it. I said Catherine did this. It wasn't Catherine. It was Alicia Dominica. She was the leader. And she draws her sword and she chops off Vandaya's head there and then. And thus the Reign of Blood is over. The Age of Apostasy ends. The ecclesiarchy is reformed, and one of the rules, and this is the one that people know about, one of the rules that comes in is the ecclesiarchy can never again have men under arms to stop them having an army. That's fine, but then what to do about the Daughters of the Emperor? Well, because fundamentally they were the ones that ended it, and because they are such good warriors, it's decided that they will be allowed to continue, and they become the Adepta Sororitas, so they become the Sisters of Battle. One thing I would say, just before I stop my ramble, is that Sisters of Battle and Adepta Sororitas are actually two slightly different things. So the Adepta Sororitas actually encompasses loads of different orders that do different things. So the militant bit is the one that you see on the tabletop, your average battle sister. But you also see there are also the orders Famulus, who basically are like diplomats, and they ingratiate themselves into the nobility of the Imperium, and they help raise and educate the children in those families, and sort of act as diplomats between them. And there's also the sort of the orders which run the hospitals and run healthcare. So you see those as those are the apothecaries basically on the
we'd like to give a big shout out to those incredible NHS workers at this time.
Yes, yeah.
Whilst we're on the topic.
Curing Nurgle's plague. No, in all seriousness, yes, yeah, we did. But yeah, so that's the sort of potted history of the background of the Adepta Sororitas, and they have become basically in terms of the hierarchy, the way to think of them, in terms of the hierarchy of getting stuff done in the Imperium when bad stuff happens, right? In your hive worlds, you have and on every world you have the Adeptus Arbites, right? You have the police. So when your gangs act up, when there's little minor things, the Arbites are the ones that, or Arbites again, don't know how it's pronounced, they go in first. Then you've got kind of your local planetary defense forces up to the Imperial Guard. That's all kind of one, the Estra Militarum, the Imperial Army. That's your next level of dealing with things. If it gets, the Sisters of Battle, if it gets so serious that the Sisters of Battle are going to be there, That's pretty much around the same time that Space Marines would probably be there as well. The difference is there's more Sisters of Battle, and obviously they're not, as you know, they're not gene enhanced, but they are supposed to be. I mean, they're above the Militarum Tempestus, who are like the sort of special forces, like top level of the Imperial Guard. They're kind of meant to be above that. They're meant to be sort of the strongest and best armed that a non-gene enhanced human can be in the Imperium.
In what way are they enhanced? Is there something about their planet or anything about them that makes them so much more powerful than an average human?
No, so they just train. They just train relentlessly. Basically, they are given better equipment than your average guardsman. So they have power armor, they have bolters, they have jump packs and things like that. Where they do get some sort of extra power from is their faith. So their belief in the God Emperor. And again, if you watch the 9th edition trailer, you saw this. The Battle Sister in that got basically shot at by a Necron Gorse Flayer, which, you know, as we saw from the poor guardsman at the start, has a tendency to just turn you to ash. And she walked into the church, she prayed, basically, and lo and behold, her hand was healed. So there's this kind of idea that the faith they have enhances their abilities as well and allows them to perform literal miracles on the battlefield.
Yeah. No, I think we will at some point do a whole episode on faith, just because I think it is one of the most interesting parts of 40k, and I'm also going to throw out there, I do think, you know, Black Templars are going to get a supplement coming early 2020 and 2021. So I think that's something we'll definitely discuss in the future. But I think we should cover it now, because I will admit I was never a fan of this side of the faith side of Warhammer. It was never not that I disliked it or anything. I just mean, like, because there's so much 40k that I love, it was never something that really drew the enjoyment out of me. But what I will say is the Horus Heresy has massively changed that for me, because the founding of the ecclesiarchy and, you know, kind of the first instances of faith in the Horus Heresy, which I won't spoil, but essentially, you know, I always thought it made no sense. And it really showed why these things make sense. We know far more about the warp now, because the Horus Heresy has got, and like lots of books they've kind of explored that. And yeah, it's been super exciting for me to kind of discover that, and I've really developed that love. So I think, you know, I've got to ask Adam, how do you think things like faith work? How does believing in how the Emperor heal that Sister Battle, you know, because obviously it's such a mystery even today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think it's meant to be. I think it's a representation of the sort of the manifest will of the Sisters and of humanity. So the idea, obviously, one thing we know, and I use the word "know" in air quotes, because again, it's kind of what we've learned through the lore in the Horus Heresy and other books, is that every single being in the universe, well, not every single being, but certainly every single human, has a sort of and not to use the Tyranid term, but has a sort of shadow in the warp, right? Has a light, or like a candle. And I think there's a line somewhere I always remember. I don't know where it's from, but I think it's talking about Eldar, and it says, like, you know, the human soul in the warp is like a candle, and an Eldar is like a raging fire, which is why they have to be so careful about their you know, getting Slanesh, basically demons come after them, because they're just easier to sort of spot in this kind of roiling nightmare that is the warp.
So conversely, Tau have a tiny soul, which is why Tau currently have no psychic beings. And what that actually means is there's an instance in War of Secrets where there are loads of Tau trapped in the warp, and they actually don't even get attacked by the demons. Meanwhile, their auxiliaries, like the Nikasar, for example, or a Tau auxiliary who are psychic, they get absolutely brutalized, obviously, straight away, but they leave the Tau just because they're not really worth it for them. And I think it's a really interesting part. Sorry, I just thought I'd throw that in because I thought it was cool.
I just have this image now of like two corn blood letters. Just one of them just seeing a load of tags. Dave, it's not worth it, mate. It's not worth it. Leave him. Go after them. Yeah. And sorry, I don't know why that.
Eat the pandas. Eat the pandas.
But yeah, so I imagine it. I don't know how it works. But one of the things I think is quite cool about it is this idea of kind of the manifest will, literally just believing. Because we know in the 40k universe that if you believe in something strongly enough, you can sort of make it happen.
Yeah, and Malkador says actually in one of the Horus Heresy books, and I won't spoil the instance because it's very, 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 very cool. But Malcador, his theory, and this might not be right, it's just his theory, is that every human being and every creature outside of a blank, and we should say probably the only exception here, is a psyker to some degree. You're just a psyker to a tiny degree. And so what happens is, his theory is that if you get enough people who are psychic to a tiny degree to all believe the same thing, something will happen. And that's probably there's lots of things that happen in 40k in terms of faith that don't fit that hypothesis, but I think that's generally the ballpark. I think of how people look at faith.
No, I think that's right. And we talked about this before recording, but I think I'll get I say we'll get loads of comments. That's very, very brave of me to assume we have enough people listening to get loads of comments. But
let's pretend we're bigger than we are.
But the one I always think of, and I don't play orcs, so if I get this wrong, shout at me, internet. But my understanding is the way that the orcs kind of psychic powers work is that the more of them believe something, it makes it happen. So why are, like, what is it, red stuff is faster, blue stuff is lucky, yellow bombs make bigger explosions, and one of the really cool
purple are invisible.
And one of the cool lore points around the orcs is when Imperial technicians get hold of their technology, it's just gaffer tape together and nothing really works, and they're just how does this operate? And it's because the orcs just believe it does, so it happens. And I think it's the same with the sisters to some extent. They believe that their faith in the Emperor allows them to do miracles, and therefore they can.
I don't think this is too conspiracy theorist, whilst being side of a 40k zone, I would say. I don't think this is too conspiracy to think, but one of the more sinister ideas that I really, really like is this idea that what happens in terms of when you believe things in the warp is you actually create reflections. The warp is a distorted reflection of this reality. So it's not actually the Emperor who is giving these Sisters of Battle their powers, in theory. It is actually their distorted belief of the Emperor. So some weird reflection of the Emperor in the warp that is empowering them. And I think that is so, that's the kind of thing that I really, really like to think about in terms of 40k, and because we'll never know, we'll never find out the answer, but I think it's a pretty cool idea. Like I said, there are lots of theories about where faith comes from. So I think moving on then, Adam, I've got to ask you, what are your favourite lore points of the Sisters of Battle or Adeptus Sororitas? I didn't realise there was a difference, so I've already learned something.
Yeah, so no, they are. It's like a big organisation with sort of lots of bits to it. But yeah, things, I don't know, favourite lore points. I mean, there are a few. I'll sort of try and skip over a few of them. So one of the ones I really like is the Zephyrim. So the Zephyrim are, if people don't know what they are, they're basically like an assault unit. And they wear jump packs, and they just go in with a bolt pistol and a power sword, and they go and smash people around the head with the power sword, basically, is what they do. And one of the cool lore things about the Zephyrim is that the idea is only the most sort of zealous and faithful of the sisters can become Zephyrim. So very, very sort of skilled sisters can become Seraphim, which is the jump pack and two pistols version, because it just takes a great deal of skill to be able to basically fly whilst also holding two pistols with a jetpack on your back. But the Zephyrim are so fervent in their faith. They don't talk in English. They speak in tongues constantly. So if you, which is a slightly bizarre situation where the idea is the Zephyrim, when they rock up on the battlefield, you've got the sisters kind of giving out orders and being sort of very militaristic and trying to solve problems. And these guys turn up who are just and they just go and attack somebody, and that's what they do, and that's their thing, which I just think is both sort of amusing and quite cool. One of the other ones, and there's a few of these lore points are things that have come and gone, and we'll touch on this in a bit about the history of the sisters in terms of in the game and where they've gone. But I think one of the ones, and I don't know, I've got the codex in front of me, and I will quickly look, but I don't know if it's in there. But one of the things they talk about, I think it's with Bloody Rose, is the idea that they are so, again, they're so fervent. Sometimes they just cry blood. They just,
brutal.
They just so, and again, this is the thing, this image of these holy, they've really done it in the new codex really well. These kind of, they're not pretty, coiffed women marching into battle. Sorry, I'm describing this really badly, but they're not they're not the stereotype of like, you know, boob armor and like we often see in video games. One of the things they've done is they've really gone for, no, yeah, fine, they are female warriors. It's an all female order of warriors, but they are badass grizzled space nuns who are religious fanatics. They cry blood, they speak in tongues, they fire flamers off everywhere. They are not people you want to run into. If the sisters turn up, if you're in the Imperium and the sisters turn up, you are in trouble, and to the same degree of fear that you would probably feel if a space marine rocked up, right? These guys are tough and dangerous, and yeah, I just think that's so cool about them. One of the other ones, again, final sort of lore point, is actually from one of the old codexes. So I think it's from the 2nd edition. They make some point about the sisters, again, they're so faithful that none of them have ever fallen to chaos, is one of the things they say about them. But that has been contradicted in the lore, because there is actually a chaos champion who is supposedly the only sister to ever fall to chaos. And she's like supposed to be a demon prince of Slaanesh, or a demon princess, I don't know. But basically a very powerful champion of Slaanesh now, because she fell, but she's the only one throughout history to ever go that way, which is quite cool.
Very, very, very cool. All right, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you about some of my, as someone who is kind of a novice of Sisters Lore, I'm going to ask you about some of my favourite parts of it. So, obviously, I have to start with Celestine. So, I'm a huge Primarch fan. I'm eternally grateful to her because she helps deliver Rabute Gilliman to the tabletop and my life. So, yeah, so how does the whole saint thing work? There are a number of saints, and we kind of got a good development on that kind of lore in like Dark Imperium. So how does saints work?
Well, okay, so I'll preface this with saying, good question. Nobody really knows how they work. Right? It's a little bit like the faith thing. They exist, and one of the things people often talk about them is they're imperial demon princes, right? They're these beings that just sort of appear a little bit. Actually, Space Marines, I guess, the Blood Angels have the Sanguinor, right? This golden being who appears at moments of great, danger and fights alongside the Blood Angels. Saint Celestine is a bit like that for the Sisters of Battle. So Saint Celestine was a member of the Order of Our Martyred Lady. And one thing I should have probably said at the start of this when I was talking about the history of the Sisters is when they do get set up, they basically get split into 6 orders. Each one of which is sort of named after the sisters who were there with Alicia Dominica. So Saint Mina is the Order of the Bloody Rose, for example, because she was the most sort of bellicose.
I was going to say, does that mean in the book because obviously in most books you're encouraged kind of to make your own chapter or craft world or sept or whatever it is. Are you kind of discouraged a little bit from making your own order?
No, you can make your own order. So the 6 are basically what they call the Orders Majoris. They're like a bit like Codex chapters, right? Like they're the big main organizations within the militant part of the Adeptus Sororitas. But you can have as many. There are named Orders Minoris as well, but you can make one up. I mean, you can come up with your own. So no, you can definitely do that. But yeah, so she was a battle sister of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, and basically she was supposedly killed during a campaign against a crusade against some sort of chaos renegades, and then all of a sudden she turned up again. Except, I mean, that is the long and short of it, right? She turned up again, except now she was clad in this golden armor, which I think is actually the armor of St. Catherine as well, actually.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And she sort of has these vast wings, like a jump pack, and carries the Ardent Blade, which is a really cool sounding weapon. And is very good in the game as well. And yeah, she just doesn't die, really. She just turns up at various wars of faith, which are like the Sisters equivalent of Crusades, and chops down a load of people, gets killed herself, and then pops straight back up again. So she's just an all-round kind of badass, really, that flies and wields a big sword.
An incredible character, and that was really, really important in the resurrection of our Lord and Saviour. So moving on from one legendary Adeptus Sororitas, let's move on to another. So let's go on to the Demonifuge. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Just because I fucking love those models. I think they're incredible. I also quite like. I'm not a sisters expert by any means, but I have heard they're not particularly competitive. I do think they add a nice bit of spice to an army. So I thought it would be cool to discuss them and kind of like their I know their lore is quite extensive, but bits of their lore, her and Kaiganul, and obviously their kind of play style and what they do.
Yeah, so the Demonifuge or Ephrael Stern.
Sorry.
Her name. She was but she they call her the Demonifuge for reasons we'll get into. So what I know of again, and I don't profess to be a particular expert on her exact lore, but this was originally in like a graphic novel comic in the early 2000s, I think, is where she was originally first sort of brought up as a character. And essentially what happens to her is that she either is part of or goes to, and again, listeners, forgive me because I can't remember off the top of my head, investigate a convent of the sisters that has gone dark. And when they get there, what they discover is the whole thing has been kind of invaded by Slanesh demons, and the battle sisters who were there, and I think it's like 99 of them, have been literally fashioned into this living cage called the Screaming Cage, and they as their kind of last act before they die, because they weren't allowed to die by the demon, but they managed to sort of overcome it with their faith. And as their last act, they channel kind of all of their belief and their faith, again, word we're going to be saying a lot tonight, into Ephrael Stern. And she basically becomes this kind of super sister, in effect. So she is like a bane to chaos. So she doesn't have psychic powers as such, but she has that kind of ability to like deal damage to chaos stuff in particular and demons. And she sets out on a sort of a quest to basically hunt down, to go off and fight demons wherever they may be. Forgive me, I don't actually know how Kaiganil of the Bloody Tears, who is her sort of Harlequin companion, I don't quite know where he comes into the story. What I do know is, for a very long time, she was under investigation by the Inquisitors, because unsurprisingly, a sister who suddenly goes to a planet full of demons, comes back and can suddenly do all these sort of crazy psychic powers and has visions of the future and wants to go off and fight demons everywhere, naturally attracts a bit of suspicion. But the Inquisition, I think, have sort of let her. They sent Inquisitors after her, but they basically realised she was on their side. So they've kind of. I think there's a story about one of them who actually accompanies her and eventually gets killed. But he realises that she is, she's good. So yeah, she's a really cool character, and the model for her is really, really cool. It's so dynamic, with kind of all her hair's up and there's like bricks flying everywhere, because she's basically kind of sort of very, I almost call it like Dragon Ball Z style, like dropping onto the base with kind of her psychic powers going off. It's just very cool.
Kaiganul, he's an outcast of the Harlequins. So, those of you who have seen Harlequins will know that they always wear masks. Kaiganul does not. And that's because he is a pariah of the group. He's outcasted from them. I do want to pick up on something you said, because I want to talk just quickly, before we'll talk more about the sisters' playstyle more later. But I just wanted to talk about their playstyle, because you did mention how she is not a psyker, but her abilities kind of manifest in a very similar way to psychic powers, and that's actually really represented in the tabletop. So for those of you that have never seen her on the table, she kind of has a smite, essentially, but it isn't a psychic power. It can't be denied. You get bonuses versus chaos factions, but it's a really, really cool thing. And Adam, I'm sure you'll know more about this than me, but you have to take them as the pair. You can't take just the one of them, unfortunately. And this is kind of a sad thing for Harlequin players. You cannot take just Kaiganul, even if you didn't want him to, because you can only take them in an Imperium detachment. It doesn't actually have to be an Adeptus Sororitas detachment, but she, as in her, once you've deployed them, they count as two separate units, and at that point, she actually does have the Adeptus Sororita keyword, so you can actually use strats on her if you have another Adeptus Sororita detachment. So they're pretty cool. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention, Adam, about kind of their playstyle. I think they're a very spicy, fun thing you can throw in your list. Obviously, sisters are very, very good, I think, as we're probably going to discuss later. Yeah. So if you maybe wanted to tone your list down and take something fun, I definitely think they're worth a look. I think they're really, really cool models.
Yeah, no, she and Carganil are very good, they're very cool models to play. Nice and fluffy. If you want to just again have some fun, and let's say you're playing a themed game, a narrative game where you want to kind of really big up the idea of the sisters kind of going after demons, for example. She's quite a cool model along with Carganil to bring along, just because she actually does do like more damage to demons. So I guess you are kind of tilting the odds towards you a little bit, but like she's not game breaking by any means. She gets like a 5-up feel no pain when Kaiganil's around, because he sort of intercepts damage, I guess, for her is the idea, which is cool. So yeah, she's a cool model on the tabletop and an interesting bit of lore behind her as well.
Fantastic, cool. So we've done a hefty chunk on lore there. I just as an excellent transition, I just thought we would talk a little bit about their history in the game. And the reason I think this is really important is for one of the reasons I mentioned in, I believe it was the last podcast, which is the Sisters' development of rules are, in my opinion, really interesting. So if you're a massive Sisters fan and have been for a really, really long time, it was really tough for a while because they had a real roundabout journey to the codex that they have now, that they got in 8th edition. A lot of people, as have pointed out, it might have been built in mind for 9th edition because there are a lot of things there that have been passed over. And so what happened was they kind of had a multitude of different rules over the years, and in 8th edition they didn't have a codex for a really, really long time. Then they had a beta codex, and then they had the codex they had today, but the beta codex was actually really, really different. You had very, very different acts of faith in that book, and it was still very, very powerful, and you could shoot twice. And they had what definitely seems to be, as I mentioned in the last podcast, a really, really long play testing period. And clearly the rules designers here took a really, really long time to make sure they got the feel and the power level of Sisters right. And by all accounts, they've kind of nailed it. I think it is pretty much agreed by everybody. No book is obviously perfect, but the Sisters are an army that I think people love because they are probably best summarized as one of the factions that are either incredible in the hands of a good player, but if you're very, very new to 40k, you haven't got much experience, they're really difficult to play, and you might find that they're compared to something like Space Marines, for example, you might struggle quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, Adam, you play quite a lot of armies. Do you kind of agree with that point of view?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they have, as you say, the Sisters have a complex history in the game, shall we say. They had kind of the disadvantage of being in and out of various books. So they had their own codex like back in 2nd edition, then they were in the Witch Hunters Codex alongside like certain other parts of the Inquisition, and then they had like a White Dwarf as well. There was a digital release around the kind of 5th edition. It went very back and forth, and as you say, now we've got this new codex, and I think they really have put the effort in with the playtesting, like 100%. They've one thing that's really interesting for me, like when I got this, because I was lucky enough that like quite a few people, I went and ordered the special edition box set when it came out, originally for the Sisters. So one of the interesting things when this came out, and we were talking about it, Sandman, among our group as well, is looking through the rules in this codex. It was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. The invulnerable saves are always up to a maximum of a 4-up, and there's this mechanic and that mechanic. Oh, I wonder if that means anything. And obviously now we know that 9th edition has come along, and we know the way that the mechanics work. And I kind of look at it and go, oh, very clearly the Sisters Codex was written with this in mind, right? It was the last codex of 8th edition, but it was clearly written and playtested alongside the rules for 9th being drafted. So it is well balanced. It has some really fluffy mechanics. So again, thinking, to go off Sisters for a second, thinking about like Necron Codex, what we've seen them do to reanimation protocols is keep that keep that in effect, and keep that kind of fluffy rule tweak that the Necrons have, but also make sure it's like balanced among the other factions, and the Sisters have that as well with their miracle dice, which we know we'll talk about a little bit further down the line, and some of their other mechanics. So yeah, no, I think really well put together. And GW really listened. I think that's the other thing. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm bigging up GWs too much, but
well, the check still hasn't come in, has it? So
no. We are still waiting on the community team. If you are listening, no. But for a long time, people thought that the Sisters were going to basically be written sort of not out of the lore, but just off the tabletop.
Yeah, they had these really I did hear that. Yeah.
and people assumed it wasn't going to happen. And the joke for ages was, we want plastic sisters. Yeah, all right. And that's why when GW did it, they came along and they were like, okay, you wanted plastic sisters, here's plastic sisters. Here's a whole range. Here's an entire redesign. And it's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and it has showed as well. And I would be very interested to look at kind of the data GW's got, because it really shows the desire there are for fantastic kits that aren't Space Marines. Because the models are incredible and they're very, very popular now. I also think it's also for a little behind the scenes look into how the Conclave works, connected to what we were talking about earlier. One of the reasons we decided to look at Sisters quite early, as we were saying earlier, the book is so good, we kind of think it's probably going to stay roughly where it is in 9th edition. I don't think it needs any massive. There'll be some tweaks. Personally, I'm not a fan of the ignoring -1 and -2. But which was something we'll probably talk about later. But outside of that, there's not a lot of the book I don't like. I think it's really, really interesting, really well balanced. And so we thought we would talk about it now because that gives this podcast a longer lifespan. Because it's quite tough to talk about things when the codexes are coming. Because obviously we don't want to do a Death Guard review now, and that which at the time of this release will probably be about a week or so away, getting the previews for. Or in fact, the previews might even be next week. We don't even know.
Well, they've already started talking about Typhus on at the time of recording. Right. They put an article up today about Typhus. So we sort of assumed it was a very weird article because it was basically, what's Typhus been up to in the universe? And it was just a sort of a tour. It was like him on holiday. It was like, this is where he's been. This is what he's been doing.
Chasing Fabri's bile,
infecting people. The normal activities of Typhus. So the previews are coming, but the Sisters, as Sandman says, the Sisters book is very likely, subject to some tweaks, again I think we'll talk about, is likely to stay as it is for a long time. And unlike a lot of codexes, which are late previous edition or early this edition, there's always people talk about a curse of an early codex, right? Yeah. So I think Necron is a good example of this in 8th edition.
Codex creep kind of thing.
Yeah. The more codexes come out, the more powerful.
Yes,
but
exactly.
This actually. You may listen to this in 6 months' time and go, "This man is an idiot. What is he talking about?"
Death Watch is still ridiculous.
The new Tyranids just roll a 6 on the game ends.
Don't even
that. But I mean, I'm sure Tyranid players would love that, to be fair. But I think this is going to hang around for a while, and I think Sisters are still, meta always changes, but I still think they're going to be up there.
I think they have so much potential and so much play style. I also think as well, one of the really interesting things about Sisters in this last, almost year, I guess, since they've come out, is they haven't got a massive showing. And the only reason I think that's happened, the main reason I think it's happened, is because, as we all know, the range is really, really new. The old models were quite hard to get hold of. And Adam, as you all know very, very well, they are very, very high-level models to paint. And so they are not an army you can just crack out for a tournament. And so from the moment they came out, they were definitely a amazing army that you could absolutely win tournaments with, but people couldn't just jump straight into them because they've released a lot of the Sisters in stages. So is it all out now?
It's all
Although
all out.
You're getting your lieutenant soon, which is really, really cool. But it's basically all out now. But that's really a 9th edition release anyway. So we're still at the kind of start of the exploration of Sisters as a play style, and I'm so like we're talking about with things like Death Watch. I'm so excited to see what people do, because I think there's so much competitive viability there.
Well, I was going to say, so 2 things on that very quickly. So one, hobby related. The reason Sandman brings this up, and he's quite right, they do take. Look, I'm not an amazing painter, but I like to take a bit of time over the Sisters because they do have loads of really cool details on all of the models, and obviously they are just physically a lot smaller than a Space Marine. But I'm sitting here now, and just off. To my left on the camera is a sort of batch of 20 Battle Sisters, which are 3/4 of the way painted, and I've been working on them for about 2 weeks. They take a little while to get them all right. But on the gaming side, on the competitive side, one thing that happened today, and if you're listening to this, go to the Warhammer community website, because they've actually got an article up at the moment called Meta Watch, which seems to be this new thing they're doing where they talk about the competitive meta. And one of the things, it's done by Val Heffelfinger and I think Peter the Falcon, who are Peter the Falcon Colosimo, who are, if you listen to other 40k podcasts, they do 40k Stats Center, which is
all
really
our
cool...
listeners are incredibly loyal, so they won't.
Yeah, listen to us, then go listen. To them. You know, I like recommending the community. But one of the things talking about the sisters that they've said, obviously, accounting for COVID and accounting for the tournament scene just kind of not being kind of being non-existent in some ways. So the Imperium, and I'm looking at the stats now in front of me, the Imperium were 54.8% of armies played in their data, and of
that is less than I thought it would be.
Yes, it's quite interesting.
Wow.
And of that, the Adeptus Sororitas were 3.3% of that Imperium.
Is that of lists? Sorry, I don't know if you want to answer this. If it says, is that of armies taken to tournaments or of armies people play?
I will tell you. Hang on. This is we're
well,
doing
essentially,
it live,
well, I mean, even if we don't know, I think it's a really interesting point because this is something that is going to change everything. I think we've all done it where we've parroted. I know I would definitely help hands say I've done this. I've parroted some statistic I've seen on like some YouTube video I've read on Reddit or something, and I have no idea where it came from. So I think this is going to be really, really exciting for us to actually get the data because a lot of the time people make very harsh judgments on the game. And before we've looked naturally since thinking that 54%, for example, is very positive because like 50%, almost 50% or almost 50% of armies are Imperium. Obviously, depending on how that is split, will affect the statement, but that's not too bad. I heard people saying that like 56% of people were playing Space Marines, so that is already a marketing improvement. Yeah.
It's interesting actually because one of the points they make, right, is that if you took every faction in 40k and split it up, they would basically all be 3.2% of the meta, right? That's if you evened it all out, they would each hold 3.2%.
I mean, sorry again. I'm really questioning Adam, and he is not claiming to be an authority on this. So really sorry, Adam. But does it mention? Does that say is that Space Marines or is that Salamanders, White Scars?
Oh no! So the Adeptus of the 54% of which I've just said that Adeptus Sororitas were 3.3% of, the Adeptus Astartes were 33.1% total. And then to give you some examples of some chapters, let me just click on this. So the Ultramarines were like 4.3%, Blood Angels were 4.4%.
I mean, one in three people play Marine. It's not ideal, but I can kind of live with that. That's not terrible, and because Space Marines are always going to get so much of a focus, and I'm controversial as it may be, I don't mind that too much because I fucking love Space Marines.
Well, the stat they give here, which is quite interesting to your point, is that the Adeptus Astartes combined as a faction represent 39% of all playable factions, but they actually account for 33% of tournament play. So they are so basically people are not like it's not everybody is taking them to their maximum is the answer. One thing I was going to say, sorry, just go back to the subject of the podcast and the sisters. Is that one of the things they give on this article is what they call TWIP, which is tournaments in winning position. So this is like a measure that is used by these guys in order to work out how well an army is doing. So basically, it means a share of all armies that receive like a 4-0 or greater, so 4 wins to 0 losses or greater at a tournament, right? Because that is a winning position generally in like a 5-round tournament. If you're 4-0, you're probably going to go through and you can potentially win it, right? And interestingly, the top factions at the moment by their TWIP ratio that is given on this are Salamanders with 2.6,
Vulcan lives,
Harlequins with 2.36. Chaos Demons with 2.14, and then Adeptus Sororitas with 1.84, followed by Orcs with 1.67. So that's the top 5. So the Adeptus Sororitas are in the top 5 at the moment as far as tournament kind of positioning and winning goes. And actually, it's interesting. They specifically say in this article, both the Adeptus Sororitas and the Adeptus Mechanicus have roughly double their expected TWIP percentage, but possess a much lower win percentage than Harlequins. This suggests that these armies have a steeper learning curve, but can perform exceptionally in the hands of the right player or the right circumstances. This means that player skill clearly matters in Warhammer 40k.
I think that's really, really cool, and I'm really glad we went on that tangent actually, because I think that was something I only saw today. In fact, I don't know if it came out today. I know they did the previous kind of video article with Nick Nanavati, but I think it's a really cool tangent, because I think we're going to talk about that a lot in the hopefully years to come of this podcast, because it's something that's really, really valuable. And like I say, just for the overall balancing of the game, like I don't know how much data the rules writers get, but this is going to really, really help them, because as we mentioned in the last podcast, it's really good when people write into GW and send their criticisms. But we are obviously all biased. But like it does mean for the rules writers, they can actually tell when Space Marines are actually busted and what parts of Space Marines are actually busted, and when people are just like upset because they've lost games. But let's get back to Sisters.
Yeah.
All the way back around. So, Adam, let's talk competitive play then, or not competitive play even. Let's just talk Sisters play. So, what are your favourite kind of play styles? How do the Sisters play? How do you like to play them? And what are kind of the popular ways to play them?
So, I think to start off this sort of segment, I think there's a few things just to establish about the way the Sisters work. So, some of their key mechanics, right, which you kind of have to understand to work out how they play. So, first of all, one of the things is that's quite interesting is the Shield of Faith rule. So Adept Sororitas units get the Shield of Faith rule. It basically means everything in your army that has the Adept Sororitas keyword has a 6-up invuln save, which is actually quite handy when you think about it, right? There's never going to be a situation in Sisters army, right? And I know it's a 1 in 6 chance. Subject to modifiers I'll get into in a bit.
If you're not paying for it, it's great.
Yeah, you're not paying for it, and you're never going to be a situation in your army where you just go, the classic one, someone shoots your like tank with an Eradicator squad, and they go, yeah, mate, it's -4, it's dead. And you go, no, it's not. I've got a 6-up invuln.
I've played a cog as Gene Silicol. I've rolled those 6s plenty of times. It does happen. Yeah, it just does happen sometimes. It's awesome. I love it. Even I believe in the Emperor, and I'm a Gene Silicol player.
Well, you believe in the 4-armed Emperor.
That's true. Right? I believe in an Emperor.
So the other thing that the Shield of Faith does allow you to do is you can also basically attempt to deny a psychic power. So even your rhinos can deny a psychic power. Now the slight issue with this is you only roll. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my truck has just denied your powerful psyker. The only issue with this is you do only roll 1d6. So it's not like a normal deny the witch test where you roll 2d6. It's roll 1. So basically, if anyone's rolling a 6 or above, then you can't deny. But again, it's a handy mechanic, and there are ways to play with it. There are ways to modify it.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, that's actually I just want to touch on that as one of those fantastic things that I think is balanced well, because like that's such a great mechanic. It's really, really cool. It comes up, it gives Sisters a bit of psychic defense. But if you're an army that is dependent on psychic powers, you are not shut down by Sisters. You can still play that army, and that's where we're getting really great rule mechanics. This is why I don't like things like, sorry, Alex, Custodes, and I don't like Dark Angels, because there are just some armies. Like some armies can take them on fine. Some armies, I'm fucked. I hate that. I hate that mechanic personally. Some people really like that, but yeah, personally, I'm not a fan. I like the balance of things like that.
Yeah, no, totally. So the other big mechanic I think that we need to address, the elephant in the room, miracle dice. So what are miracle dice? So miracle dice, or as they're referred to, as this is all comes in the codex under the words act of faith, right? So this is that representation on the tabletop of what we've been talking about throughout the podcast of the Sisters believe in something and they literally pull off a miracle, right? So the way this works is when you do certain things in the game, and there are rules that also just make this sort of just go off. You roll a dice, and you take the result of that dice, D6, and you just pop it into a pool that you retain as the game goes on. And there are different ways of getting this. So, for example, if a character unit dies, that's called sacrifice, and that allows you to get a miracle dice. Or if you resist a psychic power using the Shield of Faith rule that we just talked about earlier, that allows you to get a miracle dice. And again, there are sort of modifiers to this. Likewise, if you destroy an enemy unit, you get to get a miracle dice, basically, which is called Vengeance. Now, what you then do with these is these dice are retained, and you can use them to, anytime you have to roll a dice, or not anytime, sorry, but certain times you have to roll a dice, you can replace that roll with dice, and I use the term dice plural there, from your miracle dice pool. Now, anyone who's played the game knows how powerful the ability to iron out averages and guarantee rolls is, right? So what you do with the miracle dice is if you have an advance roll, a charge roll, a deny the witch test, a hit roll, a wound roll, a saving throw, a damage roll, or a morale test, so it's a pretty big range of stuff, you can just go, okay, so let me give you an example. I've just hit you with my my Exorcist, which unit we'll talk about in a bit. I've just hit you with this D6 damage weapon. You've got, 5 wounds left on your big tank that I need to get rid of? Okay, I'm not going to roll the damage. There's a 6. That's it. It's dead. Right?
Absolutely.
So it allows you to control the averages, and it represents that way of sisters pulling off miracles on the battlefield. And it is so cool. I cannot emphasize how useful as a game tool if you know how to use it, and just how funny it can be. So I will give you a practical example. You can use basically an act of faith per phase, again subject to modifiers that I won't go into because it's quite complicated, but you can basically use them for different one each phase. So let's say, for example, you have the golden pile of 2 6s, or let's just say 3 6s. Let's say you got the best, right? You got 3 6s. I've got my unit of Repentia, which are like assault sisters. They're these kind of guys with big chain swords. I want to get them over to somebody. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move them, obviously, in the movement phase. I'm going to advance them in the movement phase, and for my advance, I'm going to go, okay, there's a 6. So I've just made a 12-inch move for a start, right, and gone double my distance, guaranteed. And what I then do in the charge phase, because these guys have no guns, is I go, oh, okay, I need to make a 12-inch charge there. Well, I can't do that normally because that's really, really difficult to roll. I'll take my 2 6s and pop them down. Because it's per roll, and a charge roll is a single roll, and they've clarified in the FAQ you use the miracle dice like that. So I've just moved 24 inches and crashed into you, and I've guaranteed it. I mean, that's such a powerful mechanic.
No, I think that's really cool, and I think actually, just as a note point for like kind of a new players to the game, what the reason Adam points out there that's a charge roll is so one of the things that you can't do is you can't use it on multiple exorcist damage shots because each exorcist damage shot is a separate roll. Whereas a charge roll, even though it is 2 dice, counts as 1 roll. I appreciate that's quite complicated. But likewise, if you had a gun that did 2 d6 shots, not 2 guns that each did a d6 shots, if you had one gun, 2 d6 shots, that is 1 2d6 roll. It gets a bit complicated, but it's something that does come up multiple times in the game, so it is really good to get familiar with that. But yeah, absolutely incredibly powerful. And sisters, as you point out, they seem incredibly well poised to take advantage of that mechanic. Obviously, like you say, they have incredible charging units in their Repentia. They have D6 damage weaponry, some of the best D6 damage weaponry in the game because melters are really great at the moment, as everyone knows, and they have excellent melters, and they have the Exorcists, which are really, really good. And one thing I've definitely seen come up in battle reports is even the 1s and the 2s, because as we all know, morale is now not a bigger issue for everybody, but is a bigger issue for your medium armies, and sisters are one of those armies that morale is a bigger issue than it was before. You don't want to be losing 14-point models, something like that, right?
Yes,
to 1s and 2s. So being able to auto pass that, it does mean that you can keep those squads around, which is super, super powerful.
Well, I mean, one thing to say as well, like if you do have a sisters unit on the tabletop that is subject to a morale test because they've lost a model, but they can roll it because if you get a 1, you get a miracle dice. So that's it's like
that's incredible. Bonus. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a good point as well. I think from the reports I've seen, it's again going back to balance. It seems people always seem to have a healthy amount of miracle dice. You're not going to have always 3 6s, but you're always people always seem to have a few of them in the pool. People don't seem to go through them that often.
Yeah, and there are as I say, there are ways that both with certain models that you can include in your army, certain units that allow you to generate additional miracle dice, and there are also ways of having there's like a relic that allows you to modify them as well. So again, you can re-roll them, or you can kind of I don't think you can add one off the top of my head. Or maybe I'm getting this confused, but there's definitely one where you can re-roll. You roll a miracle dice and you get a 1, and you go, okay, I don't need that. You can re-roll it, and
turn 1 in and turn 1 to a 6 or something.
Yeah,
like
there are order
Yeah.
traits as well, which allow you to like. There's one which is Ebon Chalice, I think, where you basically you start off with a free 6. There's other ones where you can like again, and miracle dice come in handy for other things as well. So there is a mechanic whereby if your character dies, you can trade in some miracle dice and bring them back with the resultant number of wounds. And I think it's you
So
can trade
cool.
in like 1 to 3, so then they just come back. And again, it's a miracle. She's
Yeah.
alive,
So
and now
cool.
she's going to hit you with a sword.
Yeah, so let's continue talking about playstyles, I guess. So what are the kind of classic Sisters armies to look out for? What do you think people should look out for? How are people playing Sisters in 9th edition?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to break down here. So we'll start off with the orders that I mentioned earlier. So a bit like Space Marine chapters, you pick an order and you gain order convictions, but they're basically like chapter tactics. They're like traits that your army has. And again, there are 6 of these. The most popular for competitive play are either the Order of the Bloody Rose and the Order of the Valorous Heart. They are probably the two, and they're two slightly different playstyles. So the Bloody Rose trait basically is called Quick to Anger, and what it says is when you resolve an attack with a melee weapon or a pistol weapon, the armor penetration characteristic is improved by 1 for that attack. So AP0 becomes AP1, AP1 becomes AP2, etc. And in addition, you add 1 to the attack's characteristic of a model with this conviction during any turn in which it made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention. So that is your aggressive Sisters playstyle. If you want to get up in the face, you want to fight. And personally, yeah, I mean, I'm looking again. I've got that Meta Watch article open, and you'll see on there they say the Bloody Rose is the most popular playstyle. I'm not surprised. It's the one I've used. It's more fun. Again, as with assault armies,
such a big deal in 9th edition as well. It's I think it's really surprised a lot of people. As I've mentioned before on the podcast, it's actually the most important phase, I should say.
Yes. Yeah. The Valorous Heart is your other option, which you sort of alluded to earlier. So Valorous Heart, they have a trait called Stoic Endurance, and it's not your other option. Other playstyles are available, but I guess these are the most popular ones that have been talked about. Valorous Heart Stoic Endurance basically says when a model with that would lose a wound, you roll a d6. On a 6, it's not lost, so they have a 6, I feel no pain. And in addition, when they are attacked with a armor penetration characteristic of -1, that weapon has an armor penetration characteristic of 0. And also, when they are in range of a particular unit in the game called the Imagifier, which is really cool. It's a sister holding up like a big banner, except the banner is a marble statue.
It's a sister holding up a sister.
Yeah, it's a sister holding up a statue of a sister. I mean, it's. I mean, God, the guns on her must be huge, like to carry this bloody marble statue around all day.
Women building women, mate. That's what we're about on the Conclave.
But what they do is they have a power where it's called they tell tales. They're like the kind of the storytellers of the Battle Sisters, and one of the tales they tell. Yeah, the podcasters, if you will. We are all of us Imagifiers in our own way. I'm not carrying a statue around, mate. You're not going to make me do it. They have a tail, which is like an aura effect, which does the same thing and allows you to ignore -1. And if you're Valorous Heart and you're in range of that, they stack. So you ignore everything up to AP2.
Which is so
right. Which is really good.
Yeah.
So when the Sisters Codex came out, these were the two that were talked about the most because again, you've basically got tanky sisters or you've got killy sisters, and those are the sort of the options that or mixing them actually. I've seen people who've done very well with kind of a battalion of Valorous Heart, so that all of their troops are very tough, very difficult to get rid of, and also there are some cool strats that they have for their vehicles, which like ignore modifiers to hit, which is really good against like aircraft. I mean, less so in 9th edition just because it's only -1, but against like aircraft and things like that. And then a Bloody Rose sort of vanguard or a different detachment to take all the elite slots that are the very killy ones and throw them at the and pistol wielding and throw them at the enemy army. There are other good ones here, so I'll just touch on them very briefly. Order of our Martyred Lady, who we discussed earlier, they have an ability to just get a miracle dice at the end of any phase in which any units were destroyed, which is quite good. And also, if a model in a unit of our Martyred Lady gets killed, the unit gets +1 basically ballistic skill for the rest of the the rest of the game. Or sorry, add 1 to the hit roll, not ballistic success. Just add 1 to the hit roll, so you can do it in combat as well. So if you want stuff that hits on 2s, that's quite good.
And it does give you some quite funny interactions there, because
yes.
as we all know, plasma is a very dangerous choice of weapon, and so people do put it on. It's not necessarily the most competitive strategy, but it's quite funny. Is people might just take some units and then use those miracle dice to force the 1, blow them up, and have the rest of the squad hit on 2s if you want. It's quite cool.
The Suicide Sergeant, or the Suicide Sister Superior, as I guess it's known, is a interesting. I don't know how viable it will be on the tabletop, but it's an interesting idea to do that. But yeah, that is what people talk about with them. They also the Order of Our Martyred Lady are a bit like the Ultramarines in the Space Marines Codex. They're the kind of, if you see a picture of a battle sister in GWR, it's almost always an Order of Our Martyred Lady. So black armor, red robes, and they are like the poster girls, as it were, of the sisters. So they have a lot of the special characters as well.
That's a good point.
Junith Eruita. It's a very, very weird name she's got, but she's a really cool model. She's the one, if people have seen pictures of the Battle Sisters, of basically a canoness who is like the captain for the sisters, and she is driving around in a big floating pulpit with a giant marble eagle on the front and 2 flamethrowers slung underneath. And she is a bit like a mini Gilliman. She gives reroll 1s as well to Order of Our Martyred Lady, which is quite cool. So again,
is there reroll 1s to? Doesn't she give reroll?
Sorry, I said reroll 1s to wound.
I remember you talking about this before, in terms of when we were talking about the new, I can't remember the name of the unit. Sorry, but
Palatine.
The Palatine's come out as your new lieutenant effectively, and this, before she was the only source of reroll 1s. So I guess, if you play Order of Martyred Lady, look at it in terms of you are getting those wider invuln bubbles, because you can also get a 4-up from Celestine. I don't know if there are any other ways, but I know Celestine can give you a 4-up bubble as well, and obviously getting that reroll 1s to wound more easily as well. So it's definitely still a good valid choice.
So I think that's the other, as I say, when I talk about playstyles, that's the other thing to touch on. So obviously you've got your order convictions. The next thing you look at with sisters is what you call the sacred rites. So these are a little bit like the if anyone listening plays Adeptus Mechanicus or has come across the AdMech, they have their what are they called? Not litanies. They have like a mechanic where you can get
canticles.
Canticles, sorry. That's the word I'm looking for. So they have a mechanic where at the start of the game you can do it. You can change it per turn. But you basically can either roll 2 or pick 1, and that gives your like army an ability. The sisters have something very similar. They have something called the Sacred Rites table, and you either roll for 2 or you pick 1. And they again are stacking abilities which can really benefit you depending on your playstyle. So to focus on one playstyle that I know, which is the Bloody Rose. So again, the -1 AP additional on your pistols and your melee weapons, and +1 attack. You have also got you've got a couple here which really work very well for you. So one of them is Hand of the Emperor, which is you roll a 1 or you pick that one, which gives you add 1 to the advance roll and add 1 to the charge roll. So again, to take my example earlier of Miracle Dice, I've now moved 13 inches, and then I make a 13-inch charge. So I've now gone 26 inches, potentially, right? Again, you can see how this is all starting to stack. The other one that you see quite a lot with the Bloody Rose is the Passion, which is that when you are resolving attack with a melee weapon, you an unmodified hit roll of a 6 scores an additional hit. So they, 6s explode, which, as we all know, can be very powerful with melee units. There are some other ones in here which are very good. So again, talking about the psychic thing, so if you come up against a psychic army, and bear in mind you pick these before the battle, so you can vary them, right? They have one here called the Aegis of the Emperor. So the Aegis of the Emperor allows you to, again, you either roll a 3 or you pick this. When a Deny the Witch test is taken for a unit with this sacred rite, add 3 to the total. So you can now deny up to a 9, right? So again, you're only denying on 1d6. But if you're against like Grey Knights or Thousand Suns or even Eldar that rely a lot on their psychic powers, potentially that could be quite useful, because most of their powers go off on like 6, 7s. They're not going off on like greater than a 9, and they may well have pluses to roll, but that could help you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, definitely worth taking versus some armies. Absolutely. But yeah, really, really powerful. Like you say, that ability to choose them before the battle, definitely, that flexibility is awesome. I don't know whether that is something that will be FAQ'd out, do you think, or is that a deliberate choice, do you think, from GW?
No, I think they'll keep it as before battle.
The only reason I mention it because I think it's an interesting talking point, because that's been a big change with 9th edition for tournaments, as little as they have been because of obviously COVID. But that's been a massive change on tournament lists, is the fact that you cannot change your warlord traits or your relics or your psychic powers or your litanies before each game, because there are some relics that can swing a game. And some warlord traits that can also do it, and that's a huge deal. That if you want to build something into your list to counter out a particular weakness, so the psychic one's a good example. So there are relics that allow certain armies to deny. You can take that, but then you have to take that versus every army you play against, and that's doesn't make it a bad decision, but it's it's a fair cost, I think, which is I think it's really, really, really cool. So things like that are pretty rare in the game.
Yeah. Whilst
I think most of us are anticipating far more faction-specific bonuses, because Necron's got one and they don't have any allies. So I'm thinking probably most factions are going to start getting them now. Yeah, most. I think a lot of them are probably going to be locked. So Sisters are, that's a really powerful one, I think, in that respect. I think that we need to talk about some units in particular. We've talked about the Exorcists a bit, but I think it's worth probably explaining a little bit more in detail what they do, because as someone that is pretty inexperienced with Sisters, they terrify me, Adam.
Yeah, so the Exorcist is the big organ tank. So if you've ever seen a picture of a Sisters army, or ever seen anybody playing with Sisters army, the sort of rhino with a church pipe organ bolted on the back, that is the Exorcist, and it is a very good, relatively cheap, I think, for what it does, tank platform. So anti-tank platform.
Not disgustingly cheap, but they're valid.
They're reasonably, I think they're
really reasonable for the choice. They
a
do a lot.
yeah.
They do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are basically a toughness 8, 12 wound tank that has the Exorcist launcher on the back and a heavy bolter bolted into the front. You can give them a hunter killer missile as well, which you can with quite a few Imperium vehicles. The Exorcist missile launcher is the thing that people mostly sort of think about with these. So they have basically there are two versions of it. There's the Exorcist missile launcher and the Conflagration missile launcher, but we'll just call it the Exorcist missile launcher and say it's got two modes because it's easier to think of it that way. So the Conflagration missile launcher I'll start with first, because that's the one you see less commonly. That is a heavy 3d6 strength 5 AP -2 1 damage like rocket. So if you want to get rid of infantry, that's the one you use, right? But the Sisters have lots of ways of getting rid of infantry. They have lots and lots of... Even the basic Battle Sister, she's got a bolter, strength 4, no AP, well, most of the time. So, it's not great, but it can do work against hordes, right? So there are lots of ways of getting rid of hordes. Where the Exorcist generally tends to get used is, as I say, as an anti-tank platform, in which case the other missile, the Exorcist missile launcher, that is heavy 3d3, strength 8, AP -3, d6 damage. So it's, if you roll pretty well on that, right, you are putting a lot of shots into your target. And yes, it needs line of sight, and it's a 48-inch range, which on the new boards covers the whole thing. But it's not like a whirlwind, for example, where it can shoot out of line of sight, etc. But it's basically very good. And there are strats for them. So as I say, if you run them as Valorous Heart, there's a strat where you can ignore modifiers to hit. So if you've got a bit of dense terrain in the way it's -1 to hit, you go, okay, no problem, I'm just going to shoot you anyway. But the one you see more commonly, I can't remember the name of the stratagem off the top of my head, but it basically allows you to, I think it's called Devastating Refrain, and it allows you to re-roll one or all or any of your 3d3 roll when you're choosing how many to hit. And the way I've seen this, only one
really
CP.
good.
The way I've seen this usually work, right, is you take it as a precaution. So the roll on which you use it is the roll you'll roll 666 and you'll get 9 shots, right? The roll on which you don't use it and you're like, yeah, I'm fine, is the roll you'll get, a 2, a 1, and a 3. So it's an interesting mechanic. But yeah, they are very good. They are a right nuisance to paint. Because they have so much detail on them, but my god, do they look gorgeous! And there is quite literally a Battle Sister sat inside playing the organ.
And Churchface
the keys
as well.
So for people who don't know, Churchface is the Exorcist driver, or the Exorcist gunner, I should say, has a helmet which is basically a big stained glass window on a church. So people call it Churchface, and it's the best helmet in the Adeptus Sororitas army.
It's such a cool model.
It's just mad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so 40k.
Just so good.
It's so 40k.
It's brilliant. Awesome. We've talked about the Imagifier, and the Imagifier is just an incredible unit. I think that ignoring -1 and 2 has become more prevalent in the game, and it's sorry, ignoring -1, I should say, has become more prevalent in the game, and ignoring -2 is pretty rare, but really, really powerful. The other unit that I see all the time is the Retributors.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I know you're a massive fan of them.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess talk us through how people play them. What do people have to watch out for when they're seeing these ladies on the table?
So the Retributors are another heavy support choice, which is actually quite a competitive field for the Sister Battle. But the Retributors are basically the guys who walk around, or the girls, sorry, who walk around with heavy bolters, multi-melters, or heavy flamers and blow things up. The reason they are so good is, well, so first of all, they're cheap for what they do. They ignore the penalties to move and fire heavy weapons, which is always good. And since the changes have come through with 9th edition to make multi-melters even more powerful, so they're now all 2 shots each, for example, and they're d6 plus 2 damage when you're in half range, melter range, and even the changes to flamers going out to 12-inch range and the heavy bolters being damage 2, all round they're just a very good unit at going in and just killing stuff. The advantage they have as well is you can bring up to 2 Armorium Cherubs with them. Now, an Armorium Cherub is basically a fat flying baby carrying a bit of ammo, and you can burn them in a turn to fire again. So if you think about it, right, you've got a unit of 4 of them plus a superior. The 4, let's say, with multi-melters, superior can just have a bolt gun or a combi bolter, and 2 Armorium Cherubs. You've basically now got 8 shots initially coming out of the unit from your multi-melters. You can then burn the Cherubs and do another 4 shots, right? Now, where this gets really wacky, and what I've done to somebody, this was pre the changes to the damage, by the way, for the new, or pre the melter rules, they were still all 1 shot each. But there is a strat called Storm of Retribution. And it's worth talking about Storm of Retribution, because you if you're taking Retributors, you are always, or most of the time, you're going to be using it. So what it does, I'm going to find it in the codex, because it does slightly different things depending on what your which model, which equipment your Retributors are using, because I'm used to sort of using it on the multi-melter side of things. So let me just find the stratagems page. Just give me a second.
I should just say as well, whilst you're looking for that, because I actually got my sister's units confused when I said Retributors. I was actually going to say Repentia.
Yeah, we'll
which is what I was going to say. But this is the thing, Adam. I was thinking of Repentia, as they are what really, really scare me. But now that you're talking about Retributors, I'm scared about Retributors too. So I'm not going to sleep tonight now.
Yeah, they have a wide range. Of,
yeah, sorry, but we will get to Repentia as well. I probably duped a lot of listeners because they were expecting. Sorry, I got confused. My bad. I have no excuses. I'm just stupid.
No, it's all right. Okay, so I found it. So this is 2 CP. So it's a little bit pricier, but this is what it does. So use a stratagem when a Retributor unit from your army fires Overwatch or is chosen to shoot with. Select one of the following. Until the end of the phase, when resolving an attack made with a heavy bolter by modelling that unit, add 1 to the hit roll. Okay, fine, good, great, but not amazing.
2's rolling 1s, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Yeah. 2's actually yes. So sorry,
we've all rolled those 2s. We've all done
it. Now they're heavy 3 and 2 damage each. That's actually yes. I take that back. That's very good. Until the end of the phase, when resolving an attack made with a heavy flamer by modelling that unit, you can re-roll the wound roll again. Very good, great if you're clearing out hordes and things like that.
That's amazing. Yeah. Strength 5 is such a great place to be. So yeah, awesome.
This is the killer for me, right? Until the end of the phase, add 12 inches to the range characteristic of multi-melters in that models in that unit are equipped with, and when resolving an attack with a multi-melter by a model in that unit, add 1 to the damage roll.
That's really good. So how much damage is that now?
So basically, you now have a 36-inch range multi-melter that within 18 inches is doing d6 plus 3 damage. Now I used this in a game against a friend of ours, Lewis Chapman, who hopefully will be happy to get a shout. Yeah, after
he hates Adam
where I was doing a fluffy game. I think I mentioned it before against these Night Lords, and this is going to sound distinctly unfluffy, but it was the Night Lords kind of attacking a sister's shrine. And his Chaos Lord, flew forward with his jump pack on. He was going to go in and sort of smash me apart with lightning claws. And he had a Contemptor Dreadnought in front of him. Got rid of the Contemptor Dreadnought, burned the Armorium Cherubs, had that strat obviously still running because it's on the same thing. Took the 2 shots at it, his Chaos Lord, and he died. Didn't go well for him.
Actually, super, and I think actually that's another little tidbit. When you use strats like that, they last until the end of the phase. So when you use abilities that allow you to shoot twice or get extra shots or whatever, they still last. So that's always a good thing to look out for. If you can stack abilities like that, then you get far more utility out of them. So that's super, super powerful.
Yeah, they're crazy good. I mean, do you want to talk about? I'll talk about Repentia very quickly.
Yes, I think let's pretend that I did that deliberately actually, and because that was really interesting. I think like I said, I wasn't scared of them, but now I'm terrified of Retributors. Let's go on to Repentia because the Repentia are what I've been seeing everywhere. Sorry about that, listeners. Repentia are some of the best sculpts, I think, in the army, and they fantastically are seeing a huge amount of play. So why is that?
Yeah, so they are just very good killing machines. I mean that is it, right? That's the long job. They go into a unit, and most of the time, whatever they're up against dies, and even knights and things like that potentially you can actually get through with a decent sized squad of these guys. So just to go back a little bit, lore wise, what the Repentia are, and this goes to the sculpts being very good. Repentia are what happens when a battle sister does something bad. So if she sins in the eyes of her convent, in the eyes of her sisters, she has to go and be a Repentia. And the way the battle sisters do this is they go, you sinned. The way you make up for this is we give you a bloody great chainsword called a Penitent Eviscerator, which is the name of my metal band. They take off take their power armor off, and they're just there in their they're basically their bodysuit, I guess, and no armor. Send them into battle, and they just have to kill. And if they kill enough, hopefully they will repent. Hence Repentia. The reason they're so good on the tabletop is that they have so all of them basically have 2 attacks with this thing base, this Penitent Eviscerator. And the Penitent Eviscerator is strength times 2, AP minus 3, and 2 damage. Now you have to subtract 1 from the hit roll when you take a swing with this thing, and they are weapon skill 3 up. So your basic battle sister is weapon skill 4 up, but a lot of the elite units like Repentia are 3 up. But what they have is a rule that basically means that they re-roll their hit rolls. So they have a rule called Zealot, and again, it's something you see throughout the Sisters Codex. The Zealot rule allows you to just re-roll your hit rolls, right? So they're pretty
Amazing.
Reliable. They have a decent amount of attacks, and they have a very powerful weapon. Now, what you then do is you stack on top of this, to go back to the playstyle point. You stack on top of this the Bloody Rose, for example, because unsurprisingly, Bloody Rose Repentia are the best. So now they're all getting 3 attacks. If you bring along a unit that's called a Ministorum Priest, which is also a unit that's in like the Imperial Guard Codex,
the Imperial Guard as well.
Imperial Guard, yeah. He gives them another attack. If you bring along a Repentia Superior, who, this is quite cool. If you include a unit Repentia in your army, your Repentia Superior, which is an elite slot, doesn't take up that elite slot. It just goes. You still have to pay the points for it, but it just goes into kind of the unaligned, non of your detachment when you're building your army. So again, for new players, when you're building your army, look out for stuff like this because it's a way of kind of saving you slots for other units.
Another shout out for the Demonifuge as well.
Yes, yeah. Again, it doesn't take up a slot, yeah. And she basically allows them to re-roll ones of wound rolls of 1 while she's in range, and she re-rolls advance rolls. But even if you haven't got her and you're running them as Bloody Rose, you think about this, You're now running into people with 3 attacks each, right, on a unit that's probably going to have 7 to 9 Repentia in it, although I have seen people run them as like units of 5, all hitting at strength 6 minimum, AP minus 4 now because you're Bloody Rose. You get another AP, another additional AP, so AP minus 4 and 2 damage. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff that can survive that, you know, Marines included, and you're re-rolling your hit rolls. There are ways to boost their strength as well. So you can, if you have the Imagifier, we mentioned earlier how the Imagifier tells the tail, which adds -1 AP. One of the ones they can do, and there are ways of getting them to tell two tails at once. One of the things they can do is give a tell a tail that gives you +1 strength.
So I believe that's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
yeah. The other one's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
So you basically you can get these guys up to like strength 7, a bucket load of attacks. Again, you use your miracle dice to get them across the field, or you stick them in a rhino in a transport of some kind to give them a bit of protection. Or you use them as a counter charge. I mean, that's the other way I've seen them being used. They just sit behind a wall. You know, you wait for somebody like an assault army to come towards you, and then you go, okay, cool. You've now got 9 of these girls running through a wall, carving you to pieces.
They're so good. I think, you really sell them. I think to me, they're on terms of a unit that is very, very buffable, but like you say, is incredibly good just on its own, and you doesn't need that, and that's super, super valuable in armies. I think the only other thing I would add to them as something that really sells them to me, Sisters have really, really great transport options. The Rhino is a really, really good unit now for Sisters, and although they're not competitive, I just fucking love Immolators. I think they're just such a cool unit.
Immolators are very cool.
I just remember the Dawn of War, and you just fill the screen with fire. It was just so incredibly fun. So Sisters having really like solid transport options makes it so much more viable, because although I think their actual Repentia doesn't have a particularly tough profile, things can't be good at everything, but but you can protect them.
I was going to say, to be fair, I mean, if you look at the datasheet, one of the things you'll see is they have a 7-up save, right? But bear in mind, they have Shield of Faith, so they have a 6-up invuln, right? Which again can be, if there are, you mentioned it earlier, Sandman, there are units that boost that invuln up to a maximum of 4+. So Celestine is one of them. There's a Warlord trait you can give to a character as well that does the same thing. So you can get them up to a 4-up invuln potentially, right? And they've also got a 5-up Feel No Pain. So they're not as they're not as killable. I mean, don't get me wrong. If someone really wants them dead, they'll die, but they're not as easily killable as
they'll probably get their points back, right? And that's what you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Really, really cool.
I mean, one thing, if we want to talk about one sort of final unit,
go ahead.
I was going to say the one that naturally, for lore reasons, I lead on to from this, which is another really cool unit I think for the Sisters, and also just a really cool model to look at, is the Mortifier. So basically, the Mortifier is what happens when, I said how a Battle Sister, if she does wrong, she gets to go and be a Repentia for a while. Well, if she decides that being a Repentia is too much, and she decides she's going to run away, then that's when the Ecclesiarchy, because they are nice, friendly people, strap the sister into a Mortifier. So a Mortifier basically is a big walking war engine, like a dreadnought, or actually the closest thing I can think of. For 40k people, think of the Nemesis Dreadnought from the Grey Knight's army, the kind of baby carrier vehicle.
For non 40k people, think of somebody carrying a baby.
Well, I was going to say for non 40k people, but anyone who's watched The Matrix, if you know those like robot thing, those armor suits they have in the slightly dumb third film, think of it like that, right? They're strapped onto the front of it, and the idea is that they feel it's pretty grim dark, actually. The idea is they feel constant pain and are just driven on to fight against the enemy. Now in the game, I mean, as a model, these are really cool because you can have like a sort of a sarcophagus on the front of it which like an iron, it looks like one of those like Iron Maiden medieval torture devices, and are strapped onto the front of a big robot that's carrying heavy bolters and big flails, which are just is just crazy grimdark and very 40k and looks very cool. On the tabletop, the reason these are so good is that basically for a start, they carry 2 heavy bolters. Potentially, you can put heavy flamers on them, but 2 heavy bolters. So again, that's 6 heavy bolter shots at 2 damage each in the new rules. That's pretty good. They've got a ballistic skill of a 3-up because they are just a sister. They're still a battle sister fundamentally. They move quite quickly, so they've got a 9-inch move, so they're pretty nippy when they want to be. They have the Adepta Sororitas keywords, so you can use stratagems on them as well. So again, they can sort of, you can use your stratagems on them, and they also dole out, again, bit like Repentia, when they get into combat, they can dole out a horrendous amount of attacks. So you can give them something called a Penitent Buzzblade, which is, as the name suggests, a big buzz saw, and that's like a like a strength 8, because they're base strength 5. This is plus 2, so it's like a strength 8 kind of tank killer. But the way I play them, and the way I've seen a lot of people play them, is for clearing out large units of the enemy. They have the Penitent Flail, and the Penitent Flail basically has, so it's plus 1 strength, minus 2 AP, 1 damage, and the rule on it is make 3 hit rolls for every 1 attack made with this weapon. Right?
Amazing.
And if you have 2 of them, because you can, in theory, you can give someone a Penitent Flail and a Buzzblade, so you can mix it up, but if you have 2 of them, you add another attack to the profile of the model. So in sum, that is 5 attacks, so that is 15 hit rolls that you make. So they make 15 attacks each. You can take them in a unit, right? So you can have 2 or 3 of these guys in a unit running around. They've got 5 wounds each, right? They've got a 4-up save for the regular one, or if you take what's called the Anchorite, which is like the sort of the leader of them, it's a little bit more expensive. They've got a 3-up save. So again, they're relatively, they haven't got the Shield of Faith, but they're potentially a little bit tankier. And you can't use, that's the other thing, you can't use Miracle Dice on them. That is the one downside. But as a unit to kind of come on the board, run into something, and just cause trouble for like 60 points, they're brilliant.
Yeah, I love things like that, Adam, because you touch on a really cool point. Because I know you love that unit, because obviously you've shown me yours, and we've talked about them a bunch of times. And I love when people do this, because one of my favourite things to do with competitive lists, and I love to see, is when people take lists that are traditionally really strong, but they tech in as a tactic. The reason I do is because it throws people. So that is a unit that I don't think you see that much. And it definitely has a use, like Adam said. There's definitely, in 9th edition, there's a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, well, there should be in your games. So they're definitely units you could tech in and make a lot out of. Before we do wrap up, Adam, I did just want to cover one thing with you, because there's 2 things really, because one is something that you mentioned to me before, and you've mentioned little bits here and there, which is how, even though the Sisters book was really, really good, they've benefited a lot in 9th. And I remember you quite rightly pointed out to me when the FAQs came out for GW to update the profiles of lots of the weapons of 40k, and it just Sisters benefited really, really well from this. And actually, you made the joke that Retributors were actually listed on that Warhammer community article, like for every single profile, because obviously, as we all know, they have an abundance of flamer and metal weapons, but they actually have an absolute crap ton of heavy bolters too. I think you've said the word heavy bolter so many times this podcast, because they're everywhere, which is fantastic, because heavy bolters are now, as we all know, just one of the they're almost a perfect profile. But the other thing I just wanted to talk about, just because I know people will be really interested in it, is the Triumph of St. Catherine. Yes. And it's a fascinating model. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of explain to people what it does, and I think it does have some competitive play, doesn't it? I think I have seen it about.
Yeah. No, the Triumph of St. Catherine is, and I've mentioned this before, I think on a previous episode of the podcast, it's the kind of cool special unit for the Sisters, and it quite literally is a funeral procession although she has been dead a long time, for St. Catherine, right? So it's a big coffin in the middle and a load of sort of little Sisters models sat around the outside. People have done, I've not actually, I'm in the process of building and painting mine now. There are plenty online, go and have a look at them. They're beautiful, some of the paint jobs people have done on them. The reason it's so good is because this thing basically is, again, I mentioned earlier those models that can give you miracle dice or allow you to modify miracle dice. It is one of those, so it just has a lot of additional buffs and abilities. So it's a 18 wound, toughness 3, strength 3, strength 3, toughness 3 model, right? Which sounds really weird to say because it's like a regular Battle Sister profile, but with 18 wounds. But it's designed to reflect the fact, as I say, it is a parade of a bunch of sisters, and it has a few different abilities, right? So it has a 4-up invuln save for a start, and it's -1 to hit it. They've FAQ'd the rules because they did change this around 9th edition, and people thought, it's because it's 18 wounds, it kind of gets around the Lookout Sir character rules, right, where it's targetable. Yep. But they've said that it still is targetable with 18 wounds, but it's treated as having 9 wounds when it's on terrain, so it can benefit from Lookout Sir and cover for those purposes, which is quite good and obscuring as well.
Really cool.
But what it has is a load of relics, basically a load of artifacts from the history of the Sisters that reflect the 6 orders.
And I should say as well, for people who haven't seen it, you don't pay CP for these relics. You just get them with the model.
Yeah, they're like free. I mean, I'm calling them relics. They're not relics in the Codex sense.
When you play Crusade and you've got like the relics on the same trying against Gaff, when you've got normal relics and you've got Crusade relics, I'm sure that gets quite confusing quite quickly.
So it allows you, one of the abilities it has, it allows you to pass morale tests automatically within 6, which you know is okay. But the relics of the matriarchs, which are these sort of 6 things, right, are just really good. So Censor of the Sacred Rose at the start of each turn, gain a miracle dice. Now, again, to go back to miracle dice, the way they work is you basically get them at the start of your turn, like, because you get a free one at the start of your turn. And again, there are warlord traits and stuff which allow you to get more than one at the start of your turn. This one is at the start of each turn. So if you burned all your miracle, let's say you're in the first turn of the game, you go second and you go first, you burn your couple of miracle dice that you might get, and then you're suddenly out. But at the start of your opponent's turn, you still get a miracle dice. That's really good. Then awesome. you have the where is it? The Simulacrum of the Argent Shroud. When you perform an act of faith for a friendly unit, whilst it is within 6 inches of this model, you can increase or decrease the value of 1 miracle dice used by 1 before you use it to a maximum of 6 and a minimum of 1. This is not cumulative with other abilities that can increase or decrease the value of a miracle dice. So again, if you've got a unit sat next to it and you need to auto pass a save, you just take your miracle dice out, and let's say it's a I don't know, a 3, and you need a 4-up. You go, cool, it's a 4-up now. I passed the save. Job done. Right? It's a very powerful ability. You have Petals of the Bloody Rose. Add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by models in friendly Sisters of Battle units when they're within 6 inches. Again, buffs up. So one of the ways people use this in game is they run Bloody Rose, and although this doesn't benefit from the order traits itself with its ludicrous 14 attacks that it starts out with, you use it alongside like a couple of units of Repentia to basically bundle through a wall like the Kool-Aid Man as a countercharge unit and just smack into the enemy and just give lots of extra attacks to everything around it.
Well, it couldn't benefit from Bloody Rose because at 14 attacks that's fine, but 15 attacks would have been over the top. That would have been game breaking. Some might say. You also have the Simulacrum of the Ebon Chalice at the start of your shooting phase. Roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches, adding 1 to the result if it's a Psyker. On a 5-up, 1 if it's a Psyker and 1 to the result if it's Chaos. So if it's a Chaos Psyker, you add 2. Those are cumulative. On a 5-up, the unit being rolled for suffers D3 mortal wounds. So if it is in combat with a load of chaos stuff, again, it's quite situational, but you can just dole out 3 mortal wounds. D3 mortal wounds. One of the reasons these are all good as well is that final one, Icon of the Valorous Heart. Once per phase, you can perform 1 act of faith for a friendly unit within 6 inches that has the act of faith ability, even if you have already performed 1 or more acts of faith. So again, one of the things, ways of like auto-passing saves, you target one of my exorcists, I auto-pass the save. You target another exorcist, normally I couldn't use the miracle dice again in the same phase, I auto-pass the save, right? It's really powerful as a buffing unit. And the way that it works is when you lose wounds, obviously it does degrade. So the way this model works, it degrades like a lot of units with a very high number of wounds. But you basically choose which of the relics to turn off as you're going down the wounds. Really cool.
So and those are set out. So at 10 to 18 wounds, it has 5 relics, not 6. It has all 5. At 5 to 9 wounds, it has 2, and at 1 to 4 wounds, it only has 1. So you can be situationally aware and kind of modify the way that the relics turn off and the buffs turn off. The other thing about this model is it is weirdly infantry and a character, so you can bring the Hospitaller, which is like the apothecary unit. You can heal it if you want. So if people are shooting at it, you can heal it up. You know, so it's quite hard to kill, and it's just a very good unit and has a lot of play, I think, in competitive as well.
No, I think that's really cool. Yeah, I'm glad I thought we should touch on that because it is a big unit and it's a big deal when it's
literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, so it's got a hell of a presence. So I think let's wrap up there. I think we've got a pretty good synopsis of Sisters. You know, some of those are the things we think you should really watch out for, and you know, I'm certainly terrified now of their capability. You know, going back to what we talked about right at the start, This is, we'll probably cover most of the factions going forward, especially as their books come out. And this is a book that we really, really like. So when we slag off the books in the future, know that we're not always like that. And come back and listen to this one. We were really, really positive. So yeah, I think we're going to call it there. Adam, where can people find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so I am at ADR Wargaming on Instagram. So if you want to see some of my sisters, there'll be some more on there shortly. Check out ADR Wargaming.
Bro, and you can find me at the Sandman Hobby, and also find us at, is it the Conclave podcast on Instagram?
The Conclave 40k on Instagram.
Ah, fuck. I knew I'd fuck that up, didn't I? I just knew it. Anyway, well, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.